everyone, welcome to our children's story. So, I am craving ice cream this hot summer afternoon, and I am going to have some. But my spoon is completely bent out of shape. Hmm. Do you know this bent out of shape spoon actually reminds me of our gospel story today? In our gospel story, Jesus went to preach at the synagogue or at the church, as it was called in those days, a synagogue. And he encountered two people who were bent out of shape in different ways. But before we get into all of that, I have got a question. What are rules? Well, I'm sure most of us know that rules are laws and principles that govern a particular situation or sphere or place. And rules are meant to be obeyed. Even the Bible tells us to obey rules, to obey authorities. Like we have different rules for like our home, there are rules in the home, there are rules in school. Every country have their own rules. There are rules in various situations, and we are to obey the rules and the law, and God asks us to obey rules. But guys, is there really any time when it is right not to obey the rule? Now, this might sound like a trick question because, as I said earlier, we are called to obey rules. But are there times when God calls us not to follow the rules, not to obey the rules? Well, let's see from some examples of a few people in real life situations that have lived through history. So the first person I've got here was a lady called Harriet Tubman. Now, Harriet lived so many years ago at a time where it was the rule to have slaves, and it was the rule for slaves not to escape. So Harriet broke the rule by escaping slavery. And she not only escaped, Harriet helped a whole bunch of people escape slavery through the Underground Railroad. So they became free. So Harriet broke the rule to help a whole bunch of people. And we have a second person. His name was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Now, Bonhoeffer was a pastor and he lived during the time of the Second World War. And the ruling regime of his time was the Nazi regime. And Bonhoeffer broke the rule by condemning the regime. He condemned their oppression of humanity, especially the Jews. And Bonhoeffer was arrested and eventually executed for breaking the rule. But he broke the rule to help a lot of people. And our third person is Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. lived in North America during the time when it was the rule for people of different race to be segregated, and it was the rule for people of different race to be oppressed. So Martin Luther King broke the rule by speaking against this oppression. And the great part is that he did this in a very peaceful way. So he broke the rule to help a whole bunch of people, and he was murdered. And the final person I have got who went against some rules was Jesus. Now, this is not really a picture of Jesus because we don't know what he looks like, but this is just an artistic impression. So Jesus came up against so many rulers of his time. And Jesus told us that the most important rule was to love God and love others. And Jesus demonstrated this by going against people who did not show love to others, which reminds me of our gospel story today about people being bent out of shape. So, in our story, one of the examples of Jesus showing that the greatest rule is to love God and love others, was when Jesus went to the synagogue or the church to preach on a Sabbath. And in those days, it was the rule for no work to be done on the Sabbath. And Jesus got to the Sabbath and he saw a lady who was crippled, and so she was bent out of shape. She was bent from the waist and she couldn't stand up straight. And she has been that way for 18 years. So she was in pain and she was suffering. And Jesus felt very sorry for her. And Jesus healed her. And the lady was so happy that she praised God. Now, that is when our second person got bent out of shape. The Bible tells us that the leader of the synagogue was really angry that Jesus healed someone on a Sabbath day. And he said, there are 6 days for working when you could have come to get your healing and not on the Sabbath day. But Jesus told him that if your donkey was thirsty on a Sabbath, you would give him water. How much more a woman who has been suffering? So Jesus once again demonstrated that it is more important to help others, to love others, and love God. So Jesus showed us that the greatest rule that we must obey at all times is to love God and love others, and this comes first before every other rule. Now, this is not an excuse to break rules, because even God tells us in the Bible that we should obey rules and obey authorities. But God tells us through Jesus that the greatest commandment is to love God and love others. And this is the number one rule. Thanks for joining us, and God bless you.